some good stories for you guys. Good morning, Nigeria. As usual, TVC has got our finger on the pulse and our eyes on the Nigerian and global streets. And we do our best to bring you trending stories that are trending across Nigeria and the world in order to have some decent and interesting dialogue about it. In our first story, the House of Representatives is considering a controversial new law that would punish Nigerians who fail to vote in general elections with either a 100,000 naira fine or 6 months in jail. Now, this bill, which has passed second reading, was sponsored by Speaker Abbas Tajuddin and Honorable Daniel Ago, and it seeks to amend the Electoral Act and make voting a legal obligation for all Nigerians aged 18 and above. Now, according to the bill, any eligible citizen who refuses to vote in national or state elections without a valid reason will be guilty of an offense. Now, the lawmakers are arguing that the proposal is aimed at tackling widespread voter apathy, which they describe as a serious threat to Nigeria's democracy. The bill authors point out that despite having millions of registered voters, actual voter turnout remains alarmingly low, a trend that they believe requires their urgent legislative intervention. If this law is passed, it would mark a dramatic shift in Nigeria's approach to civic responsibility. Some people might argue that in a true democracy, the right to vote should also include the right not to vote. I think that instead of punishing Nigerians for this voter apathy, we should look at why they don't want to engage in voting. I'm talking to you, INEC. It's almost like punishing passengers for abandoning a sinking ship, if you ask me. Let's take a look at social media. This is very interesting. Tough for Life says, they want to force you to vote, but when you cave in and decide to go out to vote, they'll use thugs to dictate for you who to vote for. The fight between 12,000 politicians versus 200 million Nigerians rages on, and we all know who's winning. I'll see you at the polls. I don't want to get fined. Daniel Rega says, none of the House of Reps members can brag of basic social amenities in their constituencies or even security, but it's vote they are talking about. If only the elections were actually 100% credible. Moving on now. It is no secret that dealing with airport staff in Nigeria, especially at Murtala Mohammed International Airport, Lagos, can test even the calmest travelers' patience. Stories of rude treatment, unnecessary delays, and subtle extortion are far too common. But should it ever escalate into physical confrontation? Well, a video is currently trending online showing a young man fighting with airport staff in Lagos. Take a look at his crash out, as Gen Zs would say. Now, the exact details of what caused this conflict remain unclear, but what is evident is that something often pushes Nigerian travelers to the brink of this sort of violence. It's not the first time that we've seen these sorts of changes. Something pushed him over the edge. Let's take a look at social media. And as opposed to asking why this man was violent, this is not to justify violence, but we should ask, what is the airport culture that often pushes passengers to the brink, as we have seen time and time again? And shouldn't airport personnel who represent Nigeria's, first port of call in the country when people come in, hold themselves to a higher standard of professionalism? Let's take a look at social media. Manny says, his actions are unacceptable, but who knows what might have triggered him. These airport officials are so pushy and inefficient. Asindemcha says, all the way from abroad, then you land in Nigeria and they begin to whine and frustrate you, make you go out of character, and then you're blamed in the end. My own madness will pass like this. Interesting. Now, team, I don't know if you guys know what a crash out is called, but that is a crash out in Gen Z terms. It means that when somebody reacts disproportionately to the situation at hand, I mean, that young man was throwing chairs in a national airport. Do you think there's a culture that sort of pushes travelers to the brink? Because this is the first time we've seen this sort of display of violence in the airports.
Well, there are quite a number of people have had very terrible experience at the airport. With all those people at the airport asking for this, asking for that. You just came back, you need your luggage, and they're making you do the rigmarole left, right, and center, and so on. At times it could be frustrating. Well, the young man involved in this thing is a Gen Z, so yeah, you guys are on short fuse. For somebody that's a little bit older, it might not degenerate to what you have shown us on this clip. And talking about the legislation to enforce voting, we talked about it earlier on the show, and I was wondering how they intend to enforce it. I really was wondering how they intend to enforce it, because for you to enforce something like that, a whole lot of processes have to be taken care of first before doing that. And one of the major things is convince Nigerians that their votes will count and they'll come out. Absolutely.
Interesting, and I'll pick it up from there, Etuma and Olamide. I think that the major thing that Nigerians need to understand is voter education, the strength and the power they wield with regards to voting, and how to ensure that their vote counts, not by violence, but by holding government accountable at the end of the day and ensuring that their vote counts, and also being part of political parties where some of these decisions are being made, and also ensuring that they reflect their ideals and ideas when they become part of political parties. So it is to encourage Nigerians to work hand in glove with political parties, especially young Nigerians who make about 70% of our population. So if you can encourage them to be part of political parties and reflect their ideas, then we'll begin to see certain changes in terms of people participating in election, and then ensuring that they are secure, they feel secure when they step out to vote. Then the other story of the matter at the airport, we do not know what transpired, but whatever had transpired, I believe that
coming out of the airport are saying that it was because of overweight luggage. They were saying he was overweight and he had to pay, and he was saying that the scales were not necessarily correct.
How is he sure that the scales were not correct? Does he work there? Is it something that he uses? These people already know how the scale works, and they are the one that will tell you whether there's something wrong with their scale or not. We travel and we see these things. So it's important that we know how we pour out our frustration. You can have a dialogue, and then you know how to channel your grievances to the right persons at the airport, and it will be addressed.
Yes, I feel that there is something wrong with the black man, especially some of us who are Nigerians. I do not get to see some of these assaults or some of these violence in the airports outside of the country. Maybe when you see it in the West, we always comport ourselves. Whenever they tell us this is the specification, we stick to it. We do checks and recheck and recheck. But when we come down to our own country, we complain, we fight ourselves and all of why, who did this to us? Well, I think the young guy, whether Gen Z or not, it's not an excuse for you to be unruly. He should be arrested if he's found guilty. And if the officials are at fault, they should be penalized. For forceful voting or compulsory voting, I think it's still good. And I'm not one who believes that our electoral system is 100% faulty or foolproof. Yeah. Because one thing is, at this level, it has been reduced to the bare minimum, where we have issues. You know, elections are rigged before elections now, before the election day, not during the election. So you can't sit back in your room and be complaining about governance and all of that without you participating. So we should think of those in the diaspora. Some of us who are, you know, essential workers, maybe cut us some slack, probably will vote a day before the military. You know, there's this constant conversation. So I feel it's a good one, but we should debate it very, very well so that at least every one of us must participate in the election. It must be done.
Thank you so much. I think I agree. I think it would be great to see higher rates of political participation in Nigeria's youth. Let's come out, guys, and see what we can do.